When 17-year-old Noah Carter and his 15-year-old brother Ben were thrown out with nowhere to go. They had exactly $100 left in the world. No family willing to help. No place to sleep. No plan for tomorrow. Most people would have spent that money on food, a motel room, or a bus ticket to somewhere new. Instead, the two brothers bought a ruined workshop at the edge of a dying town. The roof leaked, half the windows were broken. The power had been disconnected years earlier. Locals laughed when they heard about it. Some said the boys wouldn't last a week. Others said the old place should have been torn down decades ago. But what nobody told them was why the workshop had been abandoned in the first place. 40 years earlier, the owner, a mechanic named Arthur Briggs, vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no body, no answers. Most people believed he ran away. Some believed he stole money and disappeared. And a few old-timers still whispered that Arthur had uncovered something dangerous before he vanished. At first, Noah and Ben only wanted a roof over their heads. Then they heard strange noises coming from behind a wall in the office. Then they found a hidden compartment. And inside that compartment was a secret ledger. A ledger filled with names, payments, and transactions that somebody had spent decades trying to keep buried. The deeper the brothers dug, the more they realized they weren't uncovering the history of an abandoned workshop. They were uncovering the reason a man disappeared. And before it was over, that $100 workshop would lead them to a secret powerful people thought had been lost forever. Before we get started, tell me down in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel around the world. And if you love stories about survival, hidden secrets, family bonds, and rebuilding a life from nothing, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for more adventures like this. Now let's go back to the day two homeless brothers spent their last $100 on a workshop nobody wanted. Noah Carter knew they were in trouble the moment the social worker parked outside the trailer and turned off the engine. The woman sat behind the steering wheel for several seconds before speaking. That was never a good sign. People who carried good news usually didn't need extra time to say it. Across the cracked dashboard, Noah could see his younger brother Ben sitting on the trailer steps with a notebook balanced on his knees. At 15, Ben still found ways to stay optimistic about almost everything. Noah had spent the past year losing that ability. "Noah," the social worker finally said, "I need you to understand this isn't your fault." Noah stared out the window. He hated when adults started sentences that way. Usually it meant something bad was about to happen, and they wanted to feel better about delivering it. "Just tell me," he said. The woman sighed. "Your father hasn't shown up for 3 weeks. The utility company shut off the electricity. The county has determined the property isn't safe." Noah already knew where the conversation was heading. He had known for days, ever since the refrigerator stopped running, ever since the water started coming out brown, ever since neighbors began looking at them with pity. "What's going to happen to Ben?" he asked. The woman hesitated again. "We're trying to locate foster placements." Noah turned toward her. "Placements?" She looked away. "Together, if possible. Together, if possible." 4 words that sounded harmless, unless you understood what they really meant. Noah glanced through the windshield toward his brother. Ben was sketching something in his notebook, completely unaware. Together, if possible, usually meant separated. Noah had seen it happen before. He had watched it happen to other kids. One went north, one went south. Different homes, different schools, different lives. "No," Noah said quietly. "No, we're not getting split up." The social worker's expression softened. "You don't get to decide that." Noah looked back toward the trailer. Watch me." 2 days later, they left before sunrise. Noah didn't tell anyone. Not the social worker, not the county office, not the neighbors. He packed everything they owned into 2 backpacks and woke Ben before dawn. "What's going on?" Ben asked sleepily. "We're leaving." Ben blinked several times. "Where?" Noah adjusted the straps on his backpack. "Don't know yet." The answer should have frightened him. Somehow, it didn't. Ben trusted Noah the way younger brothers sometimes do. Completely. Absolutely. It was both comforting and terrifying. By noon, they had walked nearly 10 miles. By evening, they were sitting behind a gas station sharing a package of crackers and a bottle of water. Their entire financial future sat inside Noah's wallet. $112. That was all they had left after buying food. Ben leaned against a brick wall. "You think Dad's coming back?" Noah didn't answer immediately. Their father had once been a decent man. At least Noah remembered him that way. Then came the drinking. Then came the gambling. Then came the disappearances that lasted days, eventually weeks. Finally, nothing. "No," Noah said. Ben nodded slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't argue. He simply looked toward the highway and changed the subject. "Okay." Noah admired him for that. The next several days blurred together. They slept wherever they could, under a picnic shelter, behind an abandoned barn, once inside a church storage shed after a janitor quietly pretended not to notice them. Noah spent every waking hour trying to think 3 steps ahead: food, shelter, safety. Meanwhile, Ben kept finding ways to make the situation feel less hopeless. He named stray dogs they encountered, made jokes about their terrible meals, filled pages of his notebook with sketches. One afternoon, while they sat outside a small-town library using free Wi-Fi, Ben suddenly looked up from a classified ads website. "Noah." "What?" "Look at this." Noah barely glanced at the screen. "We're not buying a tractor." "Not the tractor." Ben pointed lower. "This." Noah leaned closer. The listing contained a single blurry photograph. An old brick building stood beside a gravel lot. Most of the windows were broken. Weeds grew through cracks in the pavement. The caption read, "Bank-owned property, former workshop, auction, minimum $100. Noah laughed. "Perfect." Ben grinned. "Right. No, not right." Noah shook his hand. "It's a wreck. It's a building." Noah stopped talking. Ben had a point. A terrible point, but still a point. They spent the next hour researching. The workshop sat on the edge of a small town called Millfield, population barely over 2,000. The property had been abandoned for years after foreclosure proceedings dragged through the courts. Nobody seemed interested in buying it. "It's $100. Ben said for perhaps the 10th time. "That's literally all our money." "Exactly." Noah rubbed his face. "Which means if this is a terrible idea, we're homeless and broke." Ben smiled. "We're already homeless." Noah hated how difficult it was to argue with logic like that. 3 days later, they arrived in Millfield. The town looked exactly like the kind of place people drove through without stopping. One main street, a diner, a hardware store, a gas station. Not much else. The workshop sat near the edge of town beside an overgrown lot. Even from a distance, Noah could see problems. The roof sagged, paint peeled from every surface. Half the front windows were boarded shut. "Wow," Ben whispered. "It's worse than the picture." Noah nodded. Much worse. Yet something about the place caught his attention. Maybe it was the size. Maybe it was the fact that despite years of neglect, the building remained standing. It looked battered rather than defeated. A small crowd had gathered for the auction. Most people appeared more interested in curiosity than ownership. The bank representative began reading paperwork. Terms, conditions, legal disclaimers. Noah barely listened. His focus remained on the workshop. What if it worked? Not permanently, not forever, just long enough to survive. The bidding started. Silence followed. Nobody raised a hand. The representative cleared his throat awkwardly. Opening bid, $100. More silence. A few people exchanged amused looks. Someone near the back laughed quietly. Ben elbowed Noah. Do it. Noah swallowed hard. Every dollar they possessed, every possibility, every safety net, all gone with one decision. Then again, what safety net? He raised his hand. 100. The auctioneer looked relieved. Do I hear 110? Nobody spoke. 105. Nothing. The crowd seemed almost disappointed. Finally, the auctioneer lifted his gavel. Sold! The sound echoed across the parking lot. Just like that, Noah and Ben owned a workshop. The crowd dispersed quickly afterward. Several people shook their heads while leaving. One older man actually laughed out loud. Kids bought themselves a headache, he muttered. Ben grinned anyway. We own a building. Noah stared at the rusted lock hanging from the front door. We own a disaster. Ben shrugged. Same thing. The bank representative handed over a key. Good luck. The tone suggested they would need it. They entered together. Dust filled the air immediately. The interior smelled like oil, rust, and forgotten years. Old tools lay scattered across workbenches. Broken shelves leaned against walls. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof. Yet despite everything, Noah felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. This place was ugly, broken, abandoned, but it belonged to them. They spent the remainder of the afternoon exploring. The workshop itself occupied most of the building. Several vehicle bays lined one wall. Behind them sat a small office, a storage room, a bathroom that hadn't functioned in years. By sunset, they had selected the office as their future bedroom. Ben swept away debris while Noah dragged an old desk against the door to help block drafts. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Darkness arrived quickly. They shared a can of soup heated over a camping stove and sat together inside the office. Outside, wind rattled loose metal panels. The building groaned occasionally as temperatures dropped. Ben opened his notebook and began sketching the workshop. Noah watched him for a moment. What are you drawing? What it'll look like later? Noah smiled despite himself. You're assuming we survive long enough to fix it. Ben didn't even look up. We will. Hours later, long after they had settled into sleeping bags on the floor, Noah stared at the ceiling, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Wind, pipes, settling wood. Old buildings always made noise. He knew that. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. Then a sound cut through the darkness. Knock. Noah's eyes opened instantly. The noise had come from somewhere nearby. He sat upright and listened. Silence. Beside him. Ben continued sleeping. Noah waited. 30 seconds? 1 minute? Nothing. He almost lay back down. Then it happened again. Knock, knock. This time there was no mistake. The sound came from behind the office wall, not outside, inside the workshop. Noah slowly reached for the flashlight beside his sleeping bag. The beam illuminated peeling paint, dusty furniture, and empty space. Everything appeared normal. Yet as he listened carefully, he heard something else, a faint scraping sound, somewhere beyond the wall, as though something hidden inside the building had just moved. Noah remained frozen for several seconds after hearing the second knock. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his hand as he stared at the office wall. The scraping sound came again, softer this time, followed by a faint rustling noise. Beside him, Ben shifted inside his sleeping bag and opened one eye. "What's wrong?" he mumbled. Noah pointed toward the wall. "Listen." They both sat quietly. The workshop groaned in the wind. Metal rattled somewhere overhead. Then came another scratch. Ben blinked twice before relaxing. "Mouse." Noah wasn't convinced. "That's a pretty loud mouse." "Maybe it's a large mouse." Noah almost laughed despite himself. Eventually, the noises stopped. Exhaustion won the argument. By morning, they were both more interested in food than mysteries. Sunlight poured through the cracked office window when Noah sat up. His back hurt from sleeping on the floor. His stomach hurt from eating too little. His hands felt stiff from the cold. Yet when he looked around the office, he felt something unfamiliar. Pride. The room was still a disaster, but it was their disaster. Ben was already awake. "Morning." "Morning." Ben held up a clipboard he had found somewhere in the workshop. Across the top he had written, "Building a home." Beneath it was a list. Roof, windows, water, food, electricity. Noah studied the page. "You forgot about becoming millionaires." Ben added it to the bottom. "Good catch." The next several days became a battle against reality. Every hour revealed a new problem. The roof leaked in 6 places. The bathroom was unusable. Most of the electrical wiring had been stripped years ago. One wall inside the workshop leaned enough to make Noah nervous. Yet each problem also gave them something to do. They started cleaning. The process felt endless. Rusted car parts filled entire corners of the building. Broken shelves collapsed under their own weight. Dust covered every surface. Several times Noah considered giving up. Ben never seemed to entertain the possibility. "Look at it this way," Ben said while dragging an old tire outside. "Every piece of junk we remove means we're winning." Noah glanced around the workshop. "By that logic, we need about 10 years. They worked from sunrise until dark. The town slowly began noticing them. Some people ignored them. Others stared. A few offered cautious encouragement. The owner of the hardware store, a middle-aged woman named Linda, gave them a box of old nails she couldn't sell. The diner owner let them fill water containers from an outdoor faucet. Small acts, nothing dramatic, but enough to matter. One afternoon, while hauling scrap metal into neat piles, Noah heard someone whistle from the sidewalk. An older man stood near the entrance of the workshop. White beard, denim jacket, curious eyes. "You boys really bought this place?" he asked. "Apparently," Noah replied. The man laughed. "Either you're brave or crazy." Ben looked up from a pile of parts. "Can we be both?" The man grinned. "Fair answer." He introduced himself as Earl Jenkins. Like most people in small towns, Earl seemed to know everything about everyone. His gaze drifted across the workshop. Haven't seen anyone working in here for decades. You knew the old owner? Noah asked. Earl's smile faded slightly. Arthur Briggs. Noah nodded. Earl looked toward the office. Something about his tone suggested there was more to the story. Before Noah could ask another question, Earl changed the subject. Keep an eye on the roof over the East Bay. Looks ready to collapse. Then he left. The conversation lingered in Noah's mind long after the man disappeared. That evening, while sharing canned beans beside a lantern, he mentioned Arthur Briggs. Ben immediately looked interested. The owner? Yeah. Think he really just walked away? Noah shrugged. No idea. Ben leaned back in his chair. Maybe he buried treasure somewhere. Definitely treasure. Maybe gold. Absolutely gold. Ben nodded seriously. Good. That's what I'm choosing to believe. The following morning brought rain. Cold, relentless rain. Water dripped through holes in the roof and formed puddles across the concrete floor. Noah spent hours climbing ladders and patching leaks with scrap metal. Every repair felt temporary. Still, temporary was better than nothing. Around midday, Ben disappeared into the office. 20 minutes later, Noah heard a crash. Ben? No answer. Another crash followed. Noah hurried inside. Ben was kneeling beside an old wooden filing cabinet. 3 drawers sat on the floor. Papers covered every surface. What happened? Noah asked. Research. Noah stared at the mess. Research usually involves less destruction. Ben ignored him. Help me move this. The filing cabinet weighed far more than it looked. Together they dragged it away from the wall. The moment it shifted, Ben pointed excitedly. See? Noah frowned. Behind the cabinet sat a narrow opening in the wall. Not large, just enough to suggest empty space behind the paneling. Ben grinned. Told you. Told me what? Old buildings always have secrets. Noah folded his arms. You watch too many movies. Maybe. But Ben wasn't entirely wrong. The opening seemed unusual. While examining it, Noah noticed something else. The paneling around the gap looked newer than the surrounding wall. Not new exactly, just less old, as though someone had repaired or covered something years after the workshop was built. Curiosity began replacing skepticism. Flashlight, Noah said. Ben handed it over immediately. Noah aimed the beam through the gap. Dust, darkness, more dust. Nothing exciting, at least, not initially. Then he noticed wood, a small compartment hidden between wall studs. There's something back there. Ben practically vibrated with excitement. Treasure, probably mice. Ben looked disappointed. 10 minutes later, they had removed enough paneling to access the compartment. Noah reached inside carefully. His fingers brushed against something metallic. He pulled it out. A key. Old-fashioned. Brass. Tarnished with age. That's weird, Ben said. Noah nodded. People didn't usually hide keys inside walls unless they wanted them hidden. He reached back inside and found another object. This time it was a photograph. Black and white, slightly faded. The image showed 3 men standing in front of the workshop decades earlier. One of them wore mechanic's coveralls. Another held a wrench. The third stood with his arms crossed and a serious expression. On the back, someone had written a single name. Arthur. Ben immediately grabbed the photo. That's him. I guess. Noah studied the picture. Arthur Briggs looked younger than expected, confident, successful, not like someone preparing to abandon everything. They searched the compartment more carefully. Additional papers emerged. Old receipts, repair records, business licenses. Nothing dramatic, yet every item seemed connected to Arthur Briggs. The deeper they searched, the stranger it felt. Someone had intentionally hidden these things. The question was why? Late that afternoon, rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through clouds and illuminated the office. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting documents into piles. Noah repaired a damaged shelf nearby. For a while, neither spoke. Then Ben suddenly froze. "Noah." The tone immediately got his attention. "What?" Ben held up a folded piece of paper. Different from the others. Older. More carefully preserved. "Look at this." Noah walked over. The paper unfolded into a hand-drawn map. Several roads appeared, nearby properties, sections of forest, a river. The workshop itself sat marked near the center. Most of the locations meant nothing to Noah. One, however, had been circled repeatedly in dark ink. No label, no explanation, just a circle. Ben stared at it. Noah stared at it. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Ben smiled. "See?" Noah sighed. "What now?" Ben tapped the map. "Definitely treasure." Noah laughed despite himself. Yet as he examined the hand-drawn circle again, an uneasy feeling settled into his stomach. Because maps hidden inside walls usually existed for a reason, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that Arthur Briggs hadn't hidden these things by accident. The map sat on the office desk for 3 straight days before Noah finally agreed to do anything about it. Ben brought it up constantly, during breakfast, while repairing the roof, while carrying scrap metal. Every conversation somehow returned to the mysterious circle drawn in dark ink. "We should check it out," Ben said one morning while balancing on a ladder. "We don't even know what it is." "Exactly." Noah looked up from a bucket of nails. "That's supposed to convince me?" Ben grinned. "Usually mysteries are more fun before you know the answer." Noah shook his head. The truth was, he was curious too. The problem wasn't curiosity. The problem was priorities. Every day they spent chasing old stories was a day not spent fixing the workshop. The roof still leaked. The office still lacked proper insulation. Food remained a daily concern. Survival came first. Yet the map kept pulling at him. Eventually, curiosity won. The circled location turned out to be only a couple miles outside town. On a cold Saturday morning, the brothers followed an old gravel road leading toward a patch of woods beyond Millfield. Ben carried the map folded inside his jacket pocket. Noah carried a backpack containing water, sandwiches, and enough caution for both of them. "You know we're probably walking toward a pile of rocks," Noah said. "Could be treasure." "It's not treasure." "Could be hidden gold." "It's definitely not gold." Ben smiled. "You sound nervous." Noah wasn't nervous. At least that's what he told himself. Still, something about Arthur Briggs lingered in his thoughts. The photograph, the hidden compartment, the key, the map. None of it felt random. After nearly 40 minutes, they reached the location. Unfortunately, it was exactly what Noah expected. Nothing. Trees, brush, a small clearing. No buried chest, no hidden cabin, no secret entrance. Just wilderness. Ben stood in the center of the clearing, looking disappointed. "Well?" Noah folded his arms. "Told you." Ben kicked a pine cone. "Maybe we're missing something." They spent another 20 minutes searching anyway. The result remained the same. Nothing. Eventually, Noah convinced Ben to head back toward town. Yet as they walked away, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. Something about the clearing bothered him. Not enough to explain why, just enough to remember it later. The following week brought progress at the workshop. A local contractor donated leftover plywood. Linda from the hardware store found them a used space heater. Even Earl Jenkins stopped by carrying a toolbox. "Belonged to my brother," he explained. "Figure it'll get more use here." Small victories accumulated. The workshop slowly began looking less abandoned. One afternoon, while organizing tools, Noah discovered something interesting. Several old cabinets still contained faded labels from Arthur Briggs's time. Spark plugs, brake parts, customer records. The labels made the place feel alive again, like echoes from another era. That evening, while eating canned soup at the office desk, Ben spread Arthur's documents across the table. "Notice something?" he asked. Noah glanced over. "Besides the fact that we should probably be doing homework instead," Ben ignored him. "Arthur kept everything." Noah looked more closely. Ben was right. Receipts, repair invoices, insurance papers, tax records. Decades of paperwork. Arthur appeared obsessively organized. "So," Ben tapped the stack, "people who keep records like this don't usually disappear without a reason." The observation lingered in Noah's mind long after dinner. The next morning, they decided to ask questions. Millfield wasn't a large town. Someone had to remember Arthur Briggs. Their first stop was the diner. The morning crowd consisted mostly of retirees drinking coffee and discussing weather. Noah showed the photograph to a waitress. "You know this guy?" The woman barely glanced at the picture. "Arthur Briggs." Noah exchanged a look with Ben. "You knew him?" "Everybody knew him." "What happened to him?" The waitress shrugged. "Depends who you ask." That answer became a pattern. The barber claimed Arthur ran away after losing money. A customer at the gas station insisted he stole from business partners. Someone else suggested gambling debts. Another mentioned a woman in another state. Every version sounded different. Every version ended the same way. Arthur disappeared. Nobody knew why. By lunchtime, Noah felt more confused than before. Ben seemed energized. "See," he said, "too many stories." Meaning? Meaning nobody actually knows what happened. They were leaving the diner when a voice interrupted them. "You're asking about Arthur Briggs." Both brothers turned. An elderly woman sat alone near the window. Silver hair, thick glasses, sharp eyes. She had been watching them for several minutes. Noah hesitated. "Maybe." The woman studied him carefully. "You bought the workshop." It wasn't a question. "Yeah." She nodded slowly. "I wondered when someone would start asking questions." The brothers exchanged another glance. "You knew him?" Ben asked. The woman stared out the window before answering. "He was my brother." Silence followed. Even Ben seemed surprised. The woman gathered her purse and stood. "Walk with me." 10 minutes later, they sat on the porch of a small white house near the edge of town. The woman introduced herself as Martha Briggs, Arthur's younger sister. A faded photograph hung near the front door. The same man from the workshop picture smiled back from inside the frame. "People told you he ran away," Martha said. Noah nodded. Martha laughed bitterly. "People say many things when they don't know the truth." She poured tea into 3 mismatched cups. Her hands moved slowly but steadily. "Did he?" Ben asked. Martha looked directly at him. "No." The answer came instantly, without hesitation, without doubt. Noah leaned forward. "How do you know?" Martha smiled sadly. "Because I knew my brother." She disappeared inside the house briefly and returned carrying a small cardboard box. Inside were letters, birthday cards, family photographs, everyday pieces of a normal life. "Arthur loved that workshop," she said. "Spent more time there than anywhere else." Noah studied the items carefully. Nothing suggested a man preparing to abandon everything. Martha seemed to notice. "Exactly." For the next hour, she shared stories. Arthur teaching neighborhood kids how to change tires. Arthur helping stranded drivers during snowstorms. Arthur staying late to repair vehicles for families who couldn't afford new ones. The man she described sounded hard-working and dependable. Not perfect, but dependable. Finally, Noah asked the question that mattered. "What happened before he disappeared?" Martha's expression changed. The shift was immediate. The warmth faded from her eyes. "That's when things became strange." The porch fell silent. Even the distant sounds of town seemed to disappear. Martha folded her hands carefully. "About 2 months before he vanished, Arthur started acting different." Noah felt his pulse quicken. "Different how?" "Distracted, nervous." She looked toward the street. "He kept saying he'd found something." Ben sat forward. "Something?" Martha nodded slowly. "That's all he would say." She paused. "Just that he'd discovered something important." Noah remembered the hidden map, the secret compartment, the key. Suddenly, everything felt connected. "Did he tell anyone?" Martha laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "Not enough." The afternoon sunlight faded gradually across the porch. Martha reached into the box and removed a folded piece of paper. The paper looked worn from years of handling. "This was the last note he ever gave me." She handed it to Noah. Arthur's handwriting covered only a few lines. "If anything happens, don't believe what they tell you." Noah stared at the words. A chill crawled up his spine. Martha's voice grew softer. 3 days later, he disappeared. Neither brother spoke. The sentence echoed in the silence. Finally, Ben looked up. "You think someone hurt him?" Martha's eyes drifted toward the photograph hanging beside the door. "I think my brother found something he wasn't supposed to find." She folded her hands tightly together. "And I think it scared him." The brothers left shortly before sunset. As they walked back toward the workshop, neither said much. The town looked different now, less ordinary, more complicated. Every storefront, every street, every familiar face, potentially connected to a mystery that had survived for decades. When they reached the workshop, Noah unlocked the office door and froze. The desk drawer stood open. Papers covered the floor. The photograph of Arthur lay face down near the wall. Ben immediately noticed it too. "We didn't leave it like that." Noah's stomach tightened. They had definitely not left it like that. Slowly, he crossed the room. Nothing appeared stolen, nothing obvious anyway, yet someone had clearly been inside. Someone had searched through their things. Then Noah noticed one final detail. Resting on top of the desk was a single scrap of paper they had never seen before. No name, no message. Just 4 words written in dark ink. "Stop digging into Arthur." Noah read the note 3 times before saying anything. Stop digging into Arthur. 4 simple words. No signature, no explanation, yet they carried enough weight to make the entire workshop feel different. Ben stood beside him staring at the paper. "That's not creepy at all," he said finally. Noah wasn't laughing. He examined the office carefully. Whoever had entered knew exactly where to look. Drawers had been opened, documents moved, boxes searched, yet nothing appeared stolen. The person hadn't come for valuables. They had come looking for information, which meant one thing: Arthur Briggs still mattered to someone. "Should we call the police?" Ben asked. Noah glanced around the room. "And tell them what? That someone broke in? The front door barely locks. Half the windows are broken." Noah sighed. "We don't exactly have evidence." Ben hated when his brother made practical points, mostly because Noah was usually right. That night, neither slept particularly well. Every creak of the building sounded suspicious. Every gust of wind seemed louder than normal. Around midnight, Noah found himself sitting in the office staring at Arthur's photograph. The note rested beside it. The more he thought about it, the less sense it made. If someone wanted them to stop asking questions, why leave a warning at all? Why not simply take the documents? Unless whoever broke in hadn't found what they were searching for. The thought lingered. The next morning, Ben woke up with a plan. That usually meant trouble. "We need to find the hidden space." Noah looked up from breakfast. "What hidden space?" "The one Arthur used." Noah sighed immediately. "Ben, think about it." Ben pointed toward the office wall. "We already found one compartment." Noah couldn't argue with that. "Old workshops don't usually come with secret storage." Ben grinned. "This one does." Despite himself, Noah found the idea reasonable. Arthur had hidden documents inside the wall. If he was worried enough to do that, perhaps he had hidden other things as well. The brothers spent the next 2 days searching every inch of the building. Most of the work felt ridiculous. They tapped walls, examined floorboards, moved cabinets, checked ceilings. At one point, Ben insisted a suspicious-looking stain might conceal a trapdoor. It didn't. What they did discover was how much potential the workshop still possessed. Beneath years of neglect lay solid craftsmanship. The building had been constructed by people who expected it to last. During one search, Noah uncovered an old sign hidden beneath piles of scrap wood. Arthur's Auto and Machine Repair. The paint had faded badly, but the lettering remained visible. Ben immediately wanted to hang it outside. Noah promised they would once the roof stopped leaking. Late Thursday afternoon, while reorganizing storage shelves, Ben vanished into the office. 5 minutes later, Noah heard a familiar crash. "Not again," he muttered. He found Ben kneeling beside an old wooden desk that had occupied the office since they bought the place. Every drawer sat open. Papers covered the floor. "You have a problem," Noah said. Ben pointed excitedly. "Look." Noah followed his finger. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed a small gap behind the desk. The desk itself had been built directly against the wall decades earlier. Years of dust hid the narrow space behind it. "And?" Noah asked. "The wall sounds different." Noah folded his arms. "You hit the wall. Several times." "Of course you did." Reluctantly, Noah stepped forward and knocked against the paneling. Solid. Then he knocked farther right. Hollow. Both brothers froze. Noah knocked again. Definitely hollow. Ben looked unbearably pleased with himself. "Told you." The discovery transformed the afternoon. They dragged the heavy desk away from the wall. Dust exploded everywhere. Hidden behind it was a section of wood paneling slightly newer than the surrounding boards, similar to the compartment they had found earlier. Someone had concealed this area intentionally. Noah examined the edges carefully. Tiny nail holes lined one side. A removable panel. "Get the pry bar," he said. Ben practically sprinted across the workshop. 10 minutes later, the panel came loose. A dark cavity appeared inside the wall. Both brothers leaned forward simultaneously. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ben whispered the word he had apparently been waiting weeks to say. "Treasure." Noah shined a flashlight inside. The beam revealed a metal box. Not large, roughly the size of a briefcase. Dust coated every surface. Cobwebs hung from the corners. Yet the box remained intact. Somebody had hidden it carefully. Noah pulled it free. The metal felt cold beneath his hands. No lock, no markings, just a plain steel container waiting silently for decades. Ben sat cross-legged on the floor. "Open it." Noah hesitated. Strange as it sounded, he felt nervous. Every clue they had found led here. Arthur's math, the warning note, Martha's stories. Whatever rested inside might finally explain why people still cared about a mechanic who vanished 40 years ago. Slowly, Noah lifted the lid. Both brothers stared inside. At first, neither understood what they were seeing. There was no money, no gold, no dramatic secret documents, just a large book wrapped in cloth. Noah carefully lifted it out. Dust drifted through the air. The cover was dark leather, worn with age, thick, heavy. A ledger. Ben frowned. "That's it?" Noah opened the cover. The first pages contained neat handwritten entries, names, dates, dollar amounts, dozens of them, hundreds perhaps. Page after page. Every line recorded some kind of payment. Some names appeared repeatedly, others only once. None meant anything initially. Then Noah noticed something. Many entries lacked explanations. No invoices, no services, just money moving between people. Large amounts of money. Very large amounts. Ben leaned closer. What kind of business was Arthur running? Noah slowly turned another page. The transactions continued. More names, more numbers, more unexplained payments. The farther he read, the stranger it became. This wasn't normal bookkeeping, at least not for a small-town mechanic. Then something slipped from between two pages and landed on the floor. A folded piece of paper. Noah picked it up and unfolded it carefully. Only one sentence had been written across the page. The handwriting matched Arthur's. Both brothers recognized it immediately from the documents hidden inside the wall. Noah read the sentence aloud. "If something happens to me, follow the money." Silence filled the office. Even the sounds of the workshop seemed to disappear. Ben looked at the ledger. Noah looked at the ledger. Suddenly, the old mechanic's disappearance felt less like a mystery from the past and more like a warning reaching across 40 years. Because whatever Arthur Briggs had discovered, he had believed the answers were hidden inside that book. And judging by the effort someone had made to conceal it, other people desperately hoped nobody would ever read it. For the next 3 nights, the ledger became more important than sleep. Every evening after finishing repairs on the workshop, Noah and Ben sat beneath the glow of a single lantern and studied Arthur Briggs's records. At first, the entries made little sense. Names, dates, dollar amounts, rows and rows of numbers stretching across hundreds of pages. Most appeared ordinary enough: payments for repairs, equipment purchases, business expenses. Yet scattered among them were transactions that felt wrong. The amounts were too large. The descriptions were too vague. Sometimes there were no descriptions at all, just initials and money. Lots of money. "Maybe it's illegal gambling," Ben suggested one night. Noah turned a page. "You got that from one crime documentary?" "2 crime documentaries." Noah shook his head. Despite the joke, he couldn't ignore the pattern emerging from the ledger. Certain names appeared repeatedly over several years. Others surfaced only during specific periods. Arthur had marked some entries with small symbols in the margins, tiny circles, check marks, occasionally an X. The symbols clearly meant something. They just didn't know what. Meanwhile, life at the workshop continued. Every morning brought new responsibilities. They repaired a broken side door, patched more sections of roof, organized tools left behind decades earlier. For the first time since arriving in Millfield, customers occasionally stopped by, mostly curious locals. A farmer needed help replacing a trailer tire. A landscaper paid them $20 to clean rusted equipment. The jobs were small, but they mattered. Each dollar stretched their future a little farther. One afternoon, while Noah worked on a lawnmower engine, a black pickup truck pulled into the gravel lot. The vehicle looked expensive, much newer than most cars in town. A man stepped out wearing polished boots and a heavy winter coat. Mid-50s, confident smile. The kind of person who seemed comfortable walking into any room. "You boys are the new owners?" he asked. Noah wiped grease from his hands. "Depends who's asking." The man laughed. "Fair enough." He extended his hand. "Vince Holloway." The name immediately sounded familiar. Noah couldn't place it. Not yet. Vince glanced around the workshop. "Heard you've been fixing this place up." "Trying to." Vince nodded approvingly. "Good. Town needs young people willing to work." The conversation remained pleasant, almost too pleasant. Vince asked about the workshop, their plans, how they were settling in. Everything sounded friendly, yet Noah noticed something odd. The man seemed especially interested in Arthur Briggs. "Find much of the old owner's stuff?" Vince asked casually. Noah felt a small warning bell ring somewhere in the back of his mind. "A few things," Vince smiled. "Arthur kept everything." There was that phrase again. Everybody seemed to know Arthur, or at least claimed they did. After a few more minutes, Vince returned to his truck and left. Ben emerged from the office almost immediately. "I don't trust him." Noah looked surprised. "You don't trust anybody." "Exactly." Ben folded his arms, "but especially him." Later that evening, while reviewing the ledger, Noah finally realized why Vince's name sounded familiar. There it was, page 47, Vince Holloway. Page 63, Vince Holloway. Page 91. Again and again and again. The name appeared dozens of times, sometimes attached to small amounts, other times linked to payments large enough to buy houses. Noah stared at the entries. Ben noticed immediately. "What?" Noah turned the ledger around. Ben's expression changed. "That's our guy." The realization transformed everything. Vince Holloway wasn't merely a businessman who happened to visit the workshop. He was one of the most frequently mentioned people inside Arthur's hidden records. The brothers spent hours examining every entry connected to his name. None of them explained much. Most included cryptic notes: inventory transfer, equipment adjustment, special shipment. The phrases sounded legitimate until you noticed the numbers attached to them. Then nothing made sense. Around midnight, Noah leaned back in his chair. "We need help." Ben looked horrified. "Adults?" Unfortunately. The next day they visited Martha Briggs. The elderly woman listened patiently while Noah explained what they had found. When he mentioned Vince Holloway, her face immediately tightened. "The Holloways," she said quietly. "What about them?" Noah asked. Martha stared out her kitchen window. "They've been powerful in this town for a long time." Ben leaned forward. "How long?" "Generations." Martha folded her hands. "His father owned construction companies. His grandfather owned farmland. They've had connections everywhere for decades." Noah exchanged a glance with Ben. That didn't prove anything, but it didn't make them feel better either. Martha studied several pages from the ledger. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. "Arthur never trusted Vince." Noah frowned. "You sure?" Martha nodded. "Very." She tapped one particular entry. "In fact, shortly before he disappeared, Arthur told me Vince was involved in something he couldn't explain." Silence settled across the room. Every answer seemed to create new questions. On their way back to the workshop, Ben couldn't stop talking. What if Arthur found corruption? Maybe. Or smuggling? Maybe. Or a secret criminal empire? Noah laughed despite himself. "You've definitely watched too many movies." Yet the idea lingered. Not the criminal empire part, the corruption part. That felt increasingly possible. The following week brought another discovery. While organizing ledger entries by date, Ben noticed something strange. "Noah." His tone immediately got attention. "Look at this." Noah walked over. Ben pointed toward a sequence of transactions occurring during the final months before Arthur disappeared. At first glance, the entries looked normal. Then Noah noticed the dates. His stomach tightened. "That's impossible." Ben nodded. The same name appeared repeatedly after Arthur's official disappearance. Not Arthur's name. Vince Holloway's. Large payments continued flowing through accounts Arthur had supposedly controlled. Weeks after he vanished. Then months. Noah checked the dates again. The numbers didn't lie. If Arthur disappeared in September, how could transactions connected to his records continue into December? Unless someone else had access. Or someone wanted people to believe Arthur remained involved. The implications felt enormous. That evening, the brothers spread every relevant page across the office floor. Papers covered nearly every surface. The more they compared entries, the stranger the pattern became. Money moved between the same small group of individuals repeatedly. Sometimes the amounts changed. The names didn't. Vince Holloway appeared near the center of almost every transaction chain. Around 11 o'clock, a truck engine rumbled outside. Both brothers froze. Visitors rarely arrived that late. The headlights swept across the workshop windows before stopping. Silence followed. Noah slowly stood. Ben reached for the flashlight. Through a crack in the office blinds, Noah watched a figure step from the vehicle. The person remained outside for only a minute. Then they returned to the truck and drove away. Neither brother recognized the driver. When they finally checked outside, they found nothing except tire tracks in the gravel. Almost nothing. Resting near the front door was an envelope. No postage, no name, just the workshop address written across the front. Noah opened it carefully. Inside was a single photocopied document. The page appeared to be part of an old financial report. Several transactions had been highlighted in red, all connected to names already appearing inside Arthur's ledger. At the bottom, Someone had handwritten 6 words. "You're looking in the right place." Noah stared at the message. Ben stared at the message. Neither spoke for several seconds, because for the first time since finding the ledger, it was no longer a secret that they were investigating Arthur Briggs. Someone knew exactly what they had discovered, and instead of warning them to stop, this person had just encouraged them to keep going. The anonymous message changed everything. Until that point, Noah and Ben had been investigating a 40-year-old mystery largely on their own. Now they knew 2 things for certain. Someone was watching what they were doing, and someone wanted them to continue. Neither possibility was comforting. The photocopied document remained spread across the office desk long after midnight. Noah studied the highlighted transactions while Ben paced the room. "So which is worse?" Ben finally asked. "The person who told us to stop, or the person helping us?" Noah looked up. "Honestly, yeah. I'm not sure." Ben nodded. That was the problem. Warnings made sense. Anonymous assistance felt far more complicated. The next morning began with rain hammering against the workshop roof. Water dripped into buckets positioned throughout the building. Noah climbed a ladder to patch another leak while Ben sorted through the growing collection of documents. Their lives had become strangely divided. Half the day was spent repairing the workshop. The other half was spent chasing Arthur Briggs's secrets. Around noon, a sheriff's cruiser rolled into the parking lot. Both brothers froze immediately. Deputy Ray Collins stepped out carrying a coffee cup and wearing the tired expression of a man who had already worked too many years in a small town. He looked to be in his early 60s. Gray hair, broad shoulders, calm eyes. The kind of lawman who probably knew everybody's business, whether he wanted to or not. "Afternoon," Ray called. Noah climbed down from the ladder. "Everything okay?" Ray glanced around the workshop. "Depends who you ask." That wasn't exactly reassuring. The deputy spent several minutes examining their repairs. Then he accepted a cup of coffee from Ben and settled into an old chair inside the office. Eventually, he got to the point. "You've been asking questions about Arthur Briggs." Noah immediately thought about denying it. Ray's expression suggested that would be pointless. "Maybe." The deputy chuckled. "Small town." "Fair enough." Ray stared at the ledger resting on the desk. Neither brother had mentioned it, yet his eyes settled on it almost instantly. "Martha tell you much?" he asked. Noah nodded. "Some." The deputy leaned back slowly. "Arthur was a good man." The statement surprised both brothers. Most people spoke about Arthur in uncertain terms. Ray sounded completely convinced. "You knew him?" Ben asked. "A little." Ray stared out the rain-streaked window. "I was a rookie deputy when he disappeared." Silence settled across the room. Noah exchanged a quick glance with Ben. This was the closest thing they'd found to an actual witness. Ray seemed to realize exactly what they were thinking. "Don't get excited," he said. "I don't know what happened to him." "But," Noah asked. The deputy sighed. "But I always thought something about the case felt wrong." Rain drummed against the roof overhead. The office suddenly felt smaller, more focused. "How wrong?" Ben asked. Ray hesitated. "Officially, Arthur was considered a voluntary disappearance." Noah frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning they believed he left town on his own." Ray's expression darkened. "I never bought it." The deputy stood and walked toward one of the workshop windows. "People disappear all the time. Most leave signs." "Arthur didn't." Ray shook his head. "No money withdrawn, no vehicle recovered, no confirmed sightings." He paused. Nothing. The answer only deepened the mystery. Before leaving, Ray offered one final piece of advice. If you're going to keep digging into this, be careful who you trust. Noah immediately thought about Vince Holloway. The deputy seemed to notice, especially people who seem eager to help. Then he walked back into the rain and drove away. That evening, the brothers reviewed the highlighted financial report left by their anonymous source. For the first time, patterns began emerging clearly. Certain transactions appeared connected. Equipment purchases, transport fees, storage rentals. Yet the businesses involved didn't logically fit together. A mechanic shop shouldn't be moving that much money. Neither should several of the companies listed. It's like pieces of a puzzle, Ben muttered. Noah nodded. Except half the pieces are missing. The breakthrough came unexpectedly 2 days later. Ben was organizing old receipts when he suddenly stopped talking. Noah immediately looked up. Silence from Ben usually meant something important. What? Noah asked. Ben held up a document. I found one. Found what? Ben spread several pages across the desk. A match. Noah moved closer. The receipt belonged to a construction supply company. The name matched one from Arthur's ledger. Another page revealed a second match. Then a third. Slowly, a picture began forming. Arthur hadn't simply been recording transactions. He had been tracking them, comparing them, following them. He was investigating, Noah whispered. Ben nodded. That's what this looks like. The realization changed how they viewed the ledger. It wasn't a bookkeeping record. It was evidence. Arthur had been building a case, against whom remained unclear, against something felt increasingly obvious. 3 nights later, Noah experienced the strange feeling of being watched. He was locking up the workshop after dark when he noticed a car parked across the street. The vehicle sat motionless beneath a dead streetlight, too far away to identify, too close to ignore. Noah watched for several seconds. The car remained still. Then, as soon as he stepped toward it, the headlights came on. The vehicle drove away immediately. Noah stood there long after it disappeared. By morning, he had convinced himself it was probably nothing. By afternoon, he no longer believed that. The next major discovery arrived through pure accident. While cleaning a storage shelf, Ben knocked over an old cardboard box. Papers spilled across the floor. Most were worthless. Old invoices, service records, random notes. Then one sheet caught Noah's attention. The paper appeared ordinary until he noticed a handwritten note scribbled in the corner. Meet at warehouse, Friday, midnight. No names, no explanation, just instructions. Warehouse? Ben asked. Noah turned the page over. An address appeared on the back. The building still existed. They knew it immediately. An abandoned warehouse near the railroad tracks on the edge of town. The location sent a chill through Noah, because the address also appeared several times inside Arthur's ledger. The brothers visited the warehouse the following day. The structure looked exactly like what decades of neglect would produce. Broken windows, rusted metal siding, weeds growing through cracked pavement. Nothing about it seemed remarkable until Noah noticed faded lettering painted near one loading dock. Holloway Transport. Both brothers stared at the words. Vince Holloway again. His name seemed to appear everywhere. Ben kicked at loose gravel. That's not suspicious at all. Noah didn't answer. Deep down, he was beginning to suspect Arthur's investigation had centered on more than one person. Vince wasn't merely involved. He might have been at the center. Back at the workshop, the brothers spent the evening connecting names and businesses from the ledger. One company led to another, then another. Gradually, an entire network emerged. Construction firms, shipping companies, equipment suppliers. Most appeared legitimate. Yet the money moving between them made little sense. "What if they're hiding something?" Ben asked. Noah rubbed his eyes. "Like what?" Ben thought for a moment. "Maybe stolen equipment?" Noah almost dismissed the idea. Then he stopped, because several entries suddenly made more sense. Equipment transfers, missing inventory, transport fees, Arthur's notes. One particular entry jumped out immediately. Large payment. No explanation. Beside it, Arthur had written 2 words in red ink: stolen parts. Both brothers stared at the notation. It was the first direct accusation they had found anywhere in the ledger, and it changed everything. Arthur Briggs hadn't stumbled into a simple financial dispute. He had uncovered an organized operation, something large enough to involve multiple businesses, something profitable enough to generate millions of dollars over several years. Most importantly, something dangerous enough to get him killed. Then Noah turned the page and found an entry that made his stomach drop. Written in Arthur's handwriting, boxed off from every other note, was a single sentence: "I finally know who is running it." Silence filled the office. Noah's eyes moved immediately to the next line. Unfortunately, the page had been torn. Whatever name Arthur wrote there was gone. Someone had removed it, deliberately, cleanly, long before the ledger was hidden inside the wall. And for the first time, Noah realized Arthur Briggs may have come much closer to the truth than anyone ever imagined. The torn page bothered Noah more than anything else they had found so far. For days he kept returning to it. Arthur Briggs had spent years collecting records, tracking payments, and connecting names. Then, after finally discovering who controlled the operation, someone removed the most important piece of information. It wasn't an accident. The missing section had been cut cleanly. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were taking. Ben became obsessed with the idea that traces of the missing name might still exist somewhere. He held the page under different lights, rubbed pencil across the back, examined the paper with a magnifying glass borrowed from Martha Briggs. Nothing worked. The name remained gone. Yet Arthur had left behind something else. A trail. If he discovered the truth once, maybe the brothers could do it again. Life at the workshop continued improving. Customers arrived more frequently now. Word spread that the Carter brothers worked hard and charged fair prices. A retired farmer brought them a broken generator. A local landscaper hired them to service equipment. For the first time since leaving home, Noah had enough money in his pocket to stop counting every dollar. The feeling should have made him happy. Instead, part of his attention remained fixed on Arthur's mystery. One rainy afternoon, Deputy Ray Collins returned. This time he brought a cardboard archive box. "What's that?" Ben asked. Ray set the box on the desk. "Old public records." Noah raised an eyebrow. "You're helping us?" Ray looked uncomfortable. "Let's call it curiosity." Inside the box were decades-old permits, property transfers, zoning applications, and business registrations. Nothing classified, nothing illegal. Just paperwork. Mountains of paperwork. Ben looked horrified. "You brought homework?" Ray smiled for the first time. Sometimes answers hide in boring places. The deputy wasn't wrong. 3 days later, while sorting through the records, Noah discovered something interesting. Multiple companies appearing in Arthur's ledger shared the same mailing address at different points in time. different business names, different industries, same address. The location belonged to a warehouse near the railroad tracks, the same warehouse connected to Holloway Transport. "That's not normal," Noah said. Ben immediately leaned over. "How not normal?" Noah pointed toward the documents. "These companies weren't related, at least officially." Ben grinned. "Which means they probably were." The brothers visited the warehouse again that evening. The building looked even more depressing in the rain. Rust stained the walls. Broken windows stared out like empty eyes. Yet now they noticed details they had missed before. Faded company logos painted over one another. Old loading records. Different business names occupying the same location over several decades. Almost as if someone kept changing identities while keeping the operation intact. "Arthur saw this," Noah said quietly. Ben nodded. "Yeah." The realization made the mystery feel closer somehow. Less historical, more personal. The next major clue arrived from Martha Briggs. She called unexpectedly one morning and asked them to stop by. When they arrived, she was waiting at her kitchen table with a small wooden box. "Found this while cleaning the attic," she explained. The box had belonged to Arthur. Inside rested old photographs, receipts, and several cassette tapes. Noah immediately sat forward. "Cassette tapes," Martha nodded. "Arthur recorded notes sometimes." Excitement flashed across Ben's face. "Please tell me you have a cassette player." Martha smiled faintly. "Of course I do." The machine looked almost as old as the tapes themselves. Dust covered the buttons. The speaker crackled when powered on. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Arthur Briggs's voice filled the room. Noah froze instantly. Until now. Arthur had existed through photographs and handwriting. Hearing his actual voice changed everything. He sounded younger than expected, calm, thoughtful, intelligent. The first few recordings contained ordinary observations about the workshop, customer accounts, equipment orders, daily life. Then the tone changed. Arthur began discussing inventory discrepancies, missing shipments, inconsistent records. His voice grew increasingly concerned. "Somebody's moving parts through the county," Arthur said in one recording. "A lot of parts." Noah and Ben exchanged a glance. Arthur wasn't guessing. He sounded certain. The next tape proved even more important. Arthur described tracing stolen equipment from federal construction projects, bulldozer parts, generators, industrial machinery, items worth enormous amounts of money. The thefts occurred across multiple counties, yet somehow everything connected back to Millfield. "This is bigger than I thought," Arthur admitted during the recording. The statement carried an unmistakable edge of fear. Then came the breakthrough. Near the end of one tape, Arthur mentioned a location, a storage building outside town. Not the warehouse near the railroad tracks, a different property entirely. "If anything happens to me," Arthur said, "the files are there." Silence followed. Then the recording ended. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Martha looked pale. Ben looked energized. Noah felt both emotions simultaneously. "Files?" Ben asked. Martha slowly nodded. "I've never heard that tape before." The storage building sat nearly 6 miles outside Millfield, hidden among abandoned farmland. According to county records, it had changed ownership multiple times over the years. None of the owners seemed connected on paper, yet Noah recognized several names from Arthur's ledger. The pattern was becoming familiar. Different people, same network. The brothers decided to visit immediately. The building turned out to be little more than an aging metal structure surrounded by weeds and rusting fences. Most of the windows were boarded shut. The roof sagged badly. "Looks promising," Ben said. Noah rolled his eyes. The place looked one strong windstorm away from collapse. Yet something about it felt important. Arthur had mentioned it specifically. That alone made it worth investigating. Getting inside proved easier than expected. A side door hung partially open. Dust covered everything. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof. Rows of empty shelves stretched across the interior. At first glance, the building appeared abandoned. Then Noah noticed footprints. Not fresh, but newer than the dust surrounding them. Someone had been there within the past few years. Maybe more recently. The discovery sharpened everyone's attention. They spent nearly an hour searching. Most of the building contained nothing useful. Empty crates, broken furniture, scrap materials. Then Ben found a loose floor panel near the back wall. "Noah!" His voice carried that familiar tone again, the one that always preceded trouble. Together they lifted the panel. Beneath it rested a weatherproof document tube. Noah carefully unscrewed the cap. Inside were dozens of papers, financial reports, shipping manifests, vehicle logs. More evidence. Far more than Arthur had hidden inside the workshop. The brothers spread the documents across the dusty floor. Their significance became obvious almost immediately. Arthur had been right. He had uncovered an organized operation involving stolen industrial equipment, multiple companies, multiple counties, years of activity. Yet one detail stood above everything else. Every major transaction connected back to a single family name. Holloway. Ben stared at the records. Noah stared at the records. Martha quietly sat down on an overturned crate. For the first time, the mystery wasn't pointing generally toward corruption. It pointed directly at someone. Vince Holloway's family appeared everywhere. Contracts, shipments, payments, storage records. The evidence felt overwhelming. Then Noah discovered one final document tucked inside the tube. Unlike everything else, this paper wasn't financial. It was personal. A handwritten letter dated 4 days after Arthur Briggs officially disappeared. Noah's pulse quickened immediately. That shouldn't have been possible. According to every record, Arthur vanished before this letter was written. Yet there it was. His handwriting, his signature, his words. Noah unfolded the page carefully. The first sentence sent a chill through the entire room. "If you're reading this, it means they found me before I could finish what I started." Nobody spoke for several seconds after Noah read the first line of Arthur Briggs's letter. The abandoned storage building suddenly felt colder. Outside, wind rattled loose metal siding. Dust drifted lazily through shafts of sunlight cutting across the room. Yet all Noah could focus on was the paper trembling slightly in his hands. "If you're reading this, it means they found me before I could finish what I started." Martha lowered herself onto an overturned crate. Her eyes never left the letter. For 40 years she had wondered what happened to her brother. Now she was listening to his voice reach across decades. Noah swallowed and continued reading. Arthur's handwriting remained neat despite the urgency of the message. He explained that the theft operation had become far larger than he initially believed. What began as stolen machinery parts had evolved into a network involving construction companies, transport firms, storage facilities, and local officials. Arthur admitted he spent nearly 2 years quietly gathering evidence. At first, he believed the authorities would help. Later, he realized some of the authorities were involved. Noah paused. Deputy Ray had suspected something similar. Arthur continued. Several people helped him gather information. Most backed away once they understood the risk. One disappeared completely. Another refused to speak to him again. By the end, Arthur trusted almost nobody. Then came the line that changed everything. "I made one mistake. I trusted the wrong friend." Ben immediately looked up. "A friend?" Noah nodded slowly. Arthur didn't include a name, not directly, but the next paragraph made it clear. The betrayal came from someone close enough to know his plans. Someone who knew where evidence was hidden. Someone who knew exactly when Arthur intended to go public. Martha's expression darkened. "He never told me that," Noah continued reading. Arthur described receiving warnings, strange phone calls, vehicles parked outside the workshop late at night, men watching from across the street. The details sounded disturbingly familiar. Several times Noah thought about the anonymous notes left at the workshop, the feeling of being watched, the mysterious car parked nearby. Suddenly, the distance between past and present felt much smaller. Arthur ended the letter with instructions. If he disappeared, whoever found the letter needed to locate one final cache of evidence, not documents, not financial records, something stronger, something impossible to explain away. At the bottom of the page, Arthur had written a set of coordinates. Ben immediately leaned closer. "Please tell me those lead somewhere interesting." Noah almost smiled. Some things never changed. Back at the workshop, the coordinates became the center of attention. Deputy Ray joined them that evening after Noah reluctantly called him. The old deputy read the letter twice before speaking. "This changes the timeline." "How?" Noah asked. Ray pointed toward the date. "Because Arthur wrote this after his official disappearance." Ben nodded. Meaning someone wanted people to believe he vanished before he actually did." Silence settled across the office. The implication was enormous. Arthur may have remained alive longer than anyone realized. The next day, Ray helped them track the coordinates. The location sat outside town, near an area of abandoned farmland and wooded hills. Interestingly, it wasn't far from the clearing marked on Arthur's original hand-drawn map. The same clearing Noah and Ben had searched weeks earlier and dismissed as empty. Ben immediately noticed the connection. "You don't think—" Noah already knew what he was thinking. Arthur's map, the mysterious clearing, the coordinates. Suddenly, the location didn't seem random anymore. They returned the following afternoon. The weather had turned colder. Gray clouds rolled across the sky, while dead leaves skittered across the ground. The clearing looked exactly as Noah remembered. Empty, quiet, unremarkable. Yet this time they knew they were missing something. "Arthur hid things," Ben said. "That's basically his whole personality." Ray chuckled. Martha simply stared across the clearing. Noah walked slowly through the area, comparing the coordinates against a handheld GPS device borrowed from Ray. The numbers led toward a large oak tree near the center of the clearing. At first, the tree seemed ordinary. Then Noah noticed deep scars carved into the bark. Old scars. Deliberate ones. "Guys!" Everyone gathered around. Several markings covered the trunk. Most had faded with time. One remained visible. A small symbol matching the same mark Arthur occasionally used inside the ledger. The circle. Ben's eyes widened. That's not a coincidence. No one argued. The search intensified immediately. They examined the roots, the surrounding ground, nearby rocks. For nearly an hour, they found nothing. Frustration began creeping in. Then Ben tripped. It wasn't dramatic, just enough to stumble over a raised section of earth near the tree. Normally, nobody would have noticed. This time, Noah did. The ground sounded hollow. He dropped to one knee and knocked against it. Hollow again. Everyone froze. Ray fetched a shovel from his truck.
20 minutes later, they uncovered a metal hatch hidden beneath years of dirt and roots.
Ben looked like Christmas had arrived early. Martha looked terrified. Noah felt both emotions simultaneously. The hatch opened with surprising ease. Beneath it was a narrow concrete chamber no larger than a walk-in closet. A survival cache. Arthur had built it carefully. Shelves lined the walls. Waterproof containers filled the corners, and stacked neatly in the center were dozens of file boxes. Ray let out a long breath. Well, nobody moved for several seconds. Then Noah climbed down first. The contents exceeded anything they expected. Arthur had copied everything. Financial records, contracts, shipping logs, photographs, audio recordings, correspondence. Years of evidence. Far more than what they found in the storage building. This wasn't a backup. It was an insurance policy. Arthur had prepared for failure. He knew someone might stop him. The realization hit Noah hard. Arthur hadn't been reckless. He had been methodical. The file boxes revealed another surprise. Several photographs showed equipment yards filled with stolen machinery. Others depicted warehouse interiors, company vehicles, loading docks, faces. Lots of faces. Some were unfamiliar. Others were immediately recognizable. Several belonged to prominent local businessmen. One appeared so often that Ben finally said it out loud. Vince Holloway is everywhere. He wasn't exaggerating. Vince appeared in photographs spanning nearly a decade. Meetings, deliveries, property inspections. Always present. Always connected. Yet one image stood apart from the rest. Noah stared at it for several moments before speaking. Who's that? The photograph showed Vince standing beside another man. Older, well-dressed, confident. The resemblance was obvious. Martha answered quietly, "His father." The room fell silent. Suddenly, everything expanded.
This wasn't just Vince Holloway's story. It was his family's story.
The operation stretched back generations. The current players inherited more than businesses. They inherited secrets. Hours passed while they sorted through evidence. Then Noah found something hidden inside the final file box. Another letter. Unlike the first, this one wasn't addressed to strangers. It carried a specific name. Martha Briggs. The elderly woman froze when Noah handed it over. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Tears appeared before she even reached the second paragraph. Arthur's words were simple, personal, heartbreaking. He apologized for involving her in danger. He explained why he stayed silent, why he couldn't tell her everything. Most importantly, he promised one thing. If you're reading this, then the truth survived longer than I did. Martha covered her mouth. For 40 years, she believed her brother vanished without explanation. Now she held proof that he had been fighting for something right until the end. Yet Arthur saved the most important revelation for the final paragraph. Noah watched Martha read it. Her eyes widened. Then she looked directly at him. "What?" Ben asked. Martha handed over the letter. Noah read the final lines. Arthur believed someone inside the Holloway family eventually turned against the operation. Someone secretly helped him gather evidence. Someone still alive when the letter was written. And according to Arthur, that person knew exactly where the final proof was hidden. Beneath the paragraph was a single handwritten clue, just 4 words. Find the old recorder. Noah stared at the message around him. Everyone remained silent. Because somewhere out there was one final piece of evidence. Not paperwork, not photographs, a recording. And judging by Arthur's wording, it contained the truth he had risked everything to protect. The phrase, "find the old recorder," dominated every conversation for the next week. It was written in Arthur Briggs's handwriting. It appeared in the final letter he left for Martha, and according to everything they had learned so far, it pointed toward the last piece of evidence he considered important enough to mention. Noah had no idea what kind of recorder Arthur meant. A cassette recorder, a voice recorder, something hidden in the workshop. The possibilities felt endless. Ben, naturally, treated it like the greatest treasure hunt in history. "At least we have a clue," he said while crawling beneath an old workbench. Noah glanced up from repairing a carburetor. "You said that about the map. And the map led to the bunker." Fair point. The workshop had changed dramatically since the brothers first arrived. Fresh paint covered parts of the exterior. The roof leaked far less often. Customers came and went throughout the day. What once looked abandoned now looked alive. Yet every improvement somehow reminded Noah of Arthur Briggs. The workshop felt less like a building and more like a conversation between past and present. Arthur built it. The brothers saved it. Now they were finishing a story he never got to complete. The search for the recorder began with the official places: the office, the hidden compartments, storage rooms, old cabinets. Nothing. Several days passed without progress. Frustration grew. Even Ben's optimism began showing cracks. Then Martha visited carrying another box from her attic. "Found more of Arthur's things," she explained. Most of the contents were ordinary. Family photographs, old receipts, manuals, letters. Yet buried near the bottom sat a faded equipment catalog. Ben nearly ignored it. Then something caught his eye. "Noah." The tone instantly got attention. Ben flipped through the pages and stopped at a photograph. The image showed a portable cassette recorder manufactured during the early 1980s. Across the page, Arthur had circled it in red ink. Noah leaned closer. "You think that's the recorder?" Ben shrugged. "It's the first actual recorder we've found. Not much, but it was something." Martha stared at the catalog for several moments. Then her eyes widened slightly. "Wait." Noah looked up. "What?" Martha tapped the image. Arthur carried one of those everywhere. Silence settled over the office. For the first time, the clue felt real. "What happened to it?" Ben asked. Martha frowned. "I don't know." The answer disappointed everyone. Yet later that afternoon, another memory surfaced. Martha called them before sunset. "The truck," she said immediately. "What truck?" Noah asked. "Arthur's old pickup." Martha sounded excited for the first time in days. "He kept things in it constantly." Noah's pulse quickened. Arthur's truck had been impounded after his disappearance and eventually sold at auction decades earlier. Most people assumed it was long gone. Fortunately, small towns have long memories. Deputy Ray spent 2 days tracking ownership records. On the 3rd day, he arrived at the workshop grinning. "Found it." Ben nearly fell off a ladder. The truck sat behind a farmhouse 30 miles away. Rust covered most of the body. Weeds grew around the tires. Yet somehow, it still existed. The elderly owner welcomed them warmly. He purchased the truck years earlier and never bothered getting rid of it. "Been sitting there forever," he admitted.
Noah tried not to look too eager. Several hours later, they were searching every inch of the vehicle. Most compartments contained nothing useful. Old tools, rusted bolts, trash. Then Ben discovered something unusual. Behind the driver's seat, hidden beneath loose upholstery, sat a narrow metal compartment. Noah. The word carried enough excitement to summon everyone instantly. Inside rested a cassette tape. Just one. No label, no markings. Yet everyone knew immediately. This was it. Back at the workshop, silence filled the office as they prepared the ancient tape player. The machine came from Martha's attic. Dusty, temperamental, old enough to qualify as an artifact. Noah inserted the cassette carefully. The tape hissed. Static crackled through the speaker. Then a voice emerged. Arthur Briggs. Every person in the room froze. Hearing him again felt different this time. More immediate, more personal. Arthur sounded tired, not frightened exactly, just exhausted. "If you're listening to this," he began, "then I probably ran out of time." Martha closed her eyes. Ben stopped moving entirely. Even Deputy Ray seemed uncomfortable. Arthur spent several minutes describing his investigation. Much of it confirmed what they already knew. Stolen industrial equipment, false invoices, shell companies, corrupt business relationships. Yet the deeper the recording went, the more specific it became. Arthur named names, detailed transactions, explained methods. He had documented everything. Then came the revelation. Arthur wasn't investigating random criminals. He was investigating the Holloway organization itself, not merely Vince Holloway, the family operation. Decades of theft hidden behind legitimate businesses. Noah glanced toward Ray. The deputy's expression remained grim. The evidence was overwhelming. Yet Arthur saved the most important information for the end. "The person who helped me," he said quietly. Everyone leaned closer. "I never wrote down their name because I wanted to protect them." Ben exchanged a glance with Noah. This was the mystery Arthur never solved openly. The insider. The person who betrayed the operation. Arthur continued. "They were a Holloway." The room fell silent. Absolute silence. Martha slowly opened her eyes. Ray stared at the tape recorder. Noah felt his pulse hammering inside his chest. A Holloway had helped Arthur. The revelation explained everything. The hidden evidence, the warnings, the opportunities Arthur somehow received. Yet it also raised a new question. Which Holloway Arthur answered moments later. His name was Daniel Holloway. Nobody recognized it immediately. Then Ray cursed softly under his breath. Vince's older brother. The room turned toward him. Ray nodded slowly. Died in a car accident back in '84. The same year Arthur disappeared. Another silence followed. Suddenly the story expanded again. Daniel Holloway hadn't merely known about the operation. According to Arthur, he wanted out. He secretly provided records, documents, and information for years. He became Arthur's source inside the family. Then both men vanished within months of each other. The implications felt staggering. Arthur's voice grew quieter near the end of the recording. Daniel told me something before he died. Noah felt his heart sink. Even after all these decades, the emotion in Arthur's voice remained obvious. He said the operation wouldn't end with one generation. Arthur paused. Static crackled softly. He was right. Then came the final sentence. The sentence Arthur considered important enough to preserve above everything else. Follow the property records. That's where they're hiding the truth. The recording ended. The tape clicked. Silence returned. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Eventually, Ben broke the silence. Property records. Ray immediately stood. County archives. Noah looked at him. You know something. The deputy hesitated. Then he nodded. Maybe. Later that evening, inside a dusty archive room beneath the county administration building, Ray pulled a series of property maps from storage. The records covered decades of land transfers surrounding Millfield. Most appeared ordinary. Then Noah noticed something. The same parcels of land kept changing ownership between companies linked to the Holloways. Different names, same properties, over and over again. Ben leaned closer. They're moving something. Noah nodded. He saw it too. The transfers formed a pattern, a trail, one that eventually led to a single property outside town, an old industrial site that appeared repeatedly throughout the records. The site sat abandoned now, or at least officially abandoned. Noah studied the address. So did Ray. So did Martha, because every clue Arthur Briggs left behind had just converged on one final location. And if Arthur was right, whatever remained hidden there would finally reveal the truth he had spent years trying to expose. The old industrial site looked abandoned from a distance. Rusted fences leaned at odd angles. Broken windows reflected the gray morning sky. Weeds pushed through cracked concrete. A faded sign hung crookedly near the entrance, its lettering almost completely erased by time. Yet after everything Arthur Briggs had uncovered, Noah no longer trusted appearances. Too many things in Millfield had looked harmless until someone examined them closely. Deputy Ray parked near the gate and shut off the engine. Nobody spoke immediately. Martha sat quietly in the back seat holding Arthur's final letter. Ben stared through the windshield with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for Christmas morning. Noah felt something different. He felt the weight of the journey. A few months earlier, he and his brother had been homeless teenagers, sleeping wherever they could. Now they were standing at the edge of a mystery that had haunted an entire town for 40 years. Ready? Ray asked. Noah nodded. The gate wasn't locked. That detail bothered him immediately. They entered cautiously. Most of the buildings appeared empty. Years of neglect had left them hollow and silent. Yet evidence of more recent activity surfaced quickly. Tire tracks, repaired locks, fresh footprints in dusty corridors. Somebody still used portions of the property. The discovery accelerated everyone's pulse. Arthur's final clue had been accurate. The truth was hidden here. The question was, what form it would take. They spent nearly 2 hours searching before Ben found the breakthrough. It happened the way most of his discoveries happened, accidentally. He leaned against a wall inside an old storage building and nearly fell through a loose section of paneling. Guys! Noah immediately recognized the tone. The wall concealed a narrow staircase descending underground. The concrete steps looked old, but stable. Ray pulled out a flashlight. Martha tightened her grip on Arthur's letter. Together they descended. The basement stretched farther than expected. Rows of shelves lined the walls. Filing cabinets occupied the center of the room. Boxes sat stacked neatly in corners. Unlike the rest of the property, this area had been maintained. Someone had kept it organized, protected, preserved. Noah felt a chill run through him. "This is it," Ben whispered. Nobody disagreed. The first box they opened contained contracts. The second contained financial records. The third contained correspondence. The deeper they searched, the clearer the picture became. Arthur Briggs had been right about everything. The stolen equipment operation had generated millions of dollars over decades. Shell companies disguised ownership. False invoices concealed transfers. Properties changed hands repeatedly to obscure responsibility. The Holloway family sat at the center of it all. Yet one discovery stood above the rest. Inside a locked filing cabinet, Ray found documents linking specific individuals directly to criminal activity. Not rumors, not suspicions. Evidence. Signed agreements. Banking records. Internal communications. Enough to destroy every remaining doubt. "This is what Arthur was looking for," Noah said quietly. Martha nodded. Tears filled her eyes. Not tears of sadness this time. Relief. 40 years of uncertainty finally had an ending. The evidence was immediately turned over to state investigators. Unlike Arthur. Noah and the others lived in a different era. Digital archives, multiple agencies, independent oversight. Once the documents became public, the story exploded. Reporters arrived from across the state. Investigators reopened long-forgotten cases. Former employees came forward with information. One revelation triggered another, then another. Within months, decades of corruption began unraveling. Some people named in the records were already dead. Others faced investigations. Several prominent local figures suddenly found themselves answering uncomfortable questions. Vince Holloway denied everything publicly. The evidence disagreed. The truth Arthur Briggs spent years protecting finally reached daylight. The official investigation into Arthur's disappearance never produced every answer. Too much time had passed. Too many witnesses were gone. Yet authorities reached one conclusion with confidence. Arthur Briggs had not abandoned his workshop. He had not stolen money. He had not run away. He disappeared while attempting to expose a criminal network operating throughout the region. For Martha, that conclusion changed everything. The town held a public ceremony the following spring. Hundreds of people attended. Some remembered Arthur personally. Others knew him only through newspaper stories and television reports. A memorial plaque was installed outside the workshop he spent most of his life building. Martha stood beside it with tears in her eyes. Noah and Ben stood nearby. When the mayor officially cleared Arthur's name, applause echoed across the street. Martha looked toward the sky and smiled. For the first time in 40 years, her brother's story belonged to the truth instead of rumors. Life continued moving forward after that. It always does. The workshop became busier than ever. Customers arrived from neighboring towns. Local newspapers featured stories about the Carter brothers. Donations of tools and materials appeared unexpectedly. Even people who had once laughed at the idea of two teenagers buying a ruined workshop now stopped by to shake their hands. Noah never quite got used to it. Ben enjoyed every second. One afternoon, several months later, Noah stood outside the workshop installing the restored Arthur's Auto and Machine Repair sign above the entrance. The same sign they discovered buried beneath scrap wood. Fresh paint gleamed in the sunlight. The building behind it no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive. Ben climbed down from a ladder and stepped back. "Looks good." Noah nodded. "Yeah." The sign felt important, not because it honored the past, because it connected the past to the future. Martha visited often. So did Deputy Ray. The workshop became a gathering place again, just as Arthur once intended. One evening near closing time, Martha handed Noah a small package. "What's this?" he asked. "Something Arthur would have wanted you to have." Inside rested a worn leather notebook, smaller than the ledger, simpler, personal. Noah opened it carefully. Most pages contained thoughts, observations, and ideas. Arthur used it almost like a journal. Near the back, a folded note waited between two pages. Noah unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Arthur Briggs. The message was short, very short, yet it captured everything. A workshop is never really about engines or tools. It's about giving people a reason to keep moving forward. Noah read the sentence twice, then a third time. Across the room, Ben laughed at something Ray said. Customers finished conversations near the front counter. Sunlight filtered through windows that had once been broken. The old building no longer echoed with emptiness. It echoed with life. Months later, on the anniversary of the day they bought the property, Noah and Ben sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. The gravel lot was full of vehicles waiting for repairs. The workshop lights glowed warmly behind them. The future no longer looked uncertain. "Remember when we bought this place?" Ben asked. Noah laughed. "Hard to forget. Everybody thought we were crazy." They weren't entirely wrong. Ben smiled. "Best $100 we ever spent." Noah looked at the building, at the sign, at the life they had built from almost nothing. $100 had bought them more than a workshop. It had bought them a home, a purpose, a family larger than the one they lost. And somehow, through Arthur Briggs, it had also given an entire town the truth. The sun disappeared below the horizon. Evening settled gently across Millfield. Noah closed Arthur's notebook and rested it beside him. The final page contained one last sentence, written years before either brother ever arrived. Looking back now, it felt less like advice and more like a promise. A man isn't remembered for what he owned. He's remembered for what he protected. Noah smiled as the workshop lights shined against the growing darkness. Arthur Briggs had protected the truth. And in doing so, he unknowingly protected two brothers who would one day walk through his door with nothing but $100 and a chance to start over.